You know how some spaces just make you feel excited to do something? Whether it's a cry cut getting your wheels spinning with what ifs, beautiful shelves of paint inviting you to decorate holiday pottery, or a giant stack of cookbooks suddenly causing you to wonder if it's time to fill the cookie jar. Well organized resources in a creative space can help bring out your creativity. Today, let's talk about how to choose and organize flexible resources for your ELA classroom anytime you've got the budget and the bandwidth. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. So if you've been listening lately, you know that we've already discussed flexible seating and flexible displays in this series on classroom design. We've even talked about the sensory dashboard for your classroom. And now we're diving into the movable resources inside your classroom. Let's consider 5 possibilities today. Your library, your maker materials, your resource decks and posters, your media elements, and your idea holders. I'm hoping that one of these will be an area where you feel like you're excited to have some growth. So don't feel like you have to tackle all of these 5 possibilities in one prep period or one weekend. The idea is just to think, wow, here are some cool possibilities. Maybe there's one direction that I'm intrigued to go. So let's start with building your library. We've talked here on the podcast before about the wonders of a classroom library. So if you don't have one yet, now could be the perfect time to start one. No classroom library is too small. You can begin anywhere. You can search out a windowsill, part of a shelf, a whole shelf, or maybe scoop up a bookshelf on the curb in your neighborhood and just start putting books on it, covers out. You don't have to have like a full plan for a year-long program with constant activities and teasers and projects. You can just start somewhere by putting some books out on a shelf, and then you can go to the next step and the next step. I really want to recommend that as you start with your library, small, medium, or large, you really focus on the most popular books with your students and the books that you think that they will grow to love. It is much better to have 10 pass them around as fast as you can winners on your shelf than 10 boxes of books that people have donated from their basement because no one in their house wanted to read them. Honestly, sort. Sorting is crucial. If you manage to get a student to check out a book from your library and take it home, and then it's a dud, that is making life harder for you as their book representative, right? We want to get a book into their hands that they will be so excited about once they actually take it home and crack it open. Having even a small curated library in your classroom is a great example to kick us off today of how a flexible resource can pay off in your lesson design. Did Kay finish the activity early? Ooh, there's a great book for her over on the shelf. Maybe Ryan needs a few minutes alone because they had a rough personal experience at lunch. Okay, grab a book. Maybe put on some headphones and head over to the flexible seating in the corner and read for a while everyone else is doing whatever. Are you doing a reading sprint with your whole class novel, but maybe Joe forgot to bring his copy of Long Way Down? No problem. Your books are there, ready to step in and fill the hole. Okay, next let's talk a little bit about art and maker materials. Early in my teaching career, I realized I was going to want a huge marker collection and a lot of costumes for many of the types of lessons I was building. So I went to my department chair to share how often I was inviting students to create and design in color, and she quickly agreed to fund some art supplies. I think I ended up with, $50 or something that I could go spend on markers, and that was perfect. And then later, she forwarded me an application for a community grant, and I was able to get $100 for a costume corner. And that was really all I needed. It was perfect. I went to Goodwill, I got some old clothing items. I think I had some wigs, like some glasses, a cane. I don't even remember what all I had, but it was just like little character pieces. And then I had this go-to box of markers. They were a fantastic addition to my classroom that year. You probably already know what types of art and maker materials would be helpful in your classroom, but let's just chat over a few ideas just in case it adds to your thinking. So for art supplies, colored pencils can be good. They are kind of the gift that keep on giving because they never run out of ink, but you do have the issue of sharpening them every once in a while. Markers can be great. That's what I chose when I first got into having art resources in my English classroom. You do want to pay attention to trying to find markers that aren't going to run out immediately because that's frustrating. Crayons are kind of the middle ground, right? You don't have to sharpen them like colored pencils. They don't run out like markers, but they're smaller and they do sort of have an association with the younger grades. So think of what would work best for you and your students, and then students can use these colors when they're sketchnoting, designing one-pagers, making posters, storyboarding scenes, prototyping theater masks, illustrating children's books, etc., etc. Obviously, some of these types of projects can be done online. I love to do many of these types of projects in Canva, but it's good to have a range of options, right? Some kids may really want to get out of their screen. Some may not like creating digitally, or maybe you don't have screens for everyone in the class. Having colored pencils and paper can work beautifully for developing ideas on the page. Then there's maker materials. We have had Angela Stockman writing Makerspace Pioneer on the podcast a couple of times, and I'd really recommend listening to those shows if you're excited about developing a makerspace. But as she has shared with us in the past, you don't need a ton of expensive materials to help students get going with making writing. They can lay out their ideas on note cards, post-it, scrap paper. They can shape characters for creative writing out of Play-Doh or popsicle sticks. They can build their arguments out of recycled materials that are totally free, but you do need a sort of organization system. You do need to invite people to bring in those recycled materials, and then maybe pick up, get your Michael's coupon and grab a bunch of Post-its or grab a big container of Play-Doh multi-pack colors or whatever. Okay. Next up, let's talk a little bit about resource decks and posters. This is something that I have thought a lot more about since becoming a curriculum designer. Sometimes you can get the information onto the walls and shelves for students to access when you know that they struggle with something. So let's consider some examples. One of the things that I think students struggle with the most is figuring out citation. Citation can be such a bear. And I don't really feel like they need to memorize all the different aspects of MLA format. And so for me, it's very convenient to put up a series of maybe 6 posters with the most common types of MLA format. So like format for citing a podcast, format for citing a YouTube video, for a website, for an online article, etc. And then when students are humming along in their paper and they're like, oh, how do I do podcast or whatever? Yes, they can go look it up on Purdue OWL and click through 7 clicks, but also maybe they could just stand up and go to your display of MLA posters and be like, oh, yep, right, podcast is like that. And it's so quick and they don't have to log into anything and there's no chance of them getting distracted by another website. It's just right there on your wall. Let's consider another example. Um, Literary terms. Those are some things that come up all the time, right? Oh, what's the difference between a metaphor and a simile? Oh, what's onomatopoeia again? Oh, I see this thing in this poem, but I can't remember what it's called. For that, maybe you have a literary terms dictionary that students can always grab, or maybe you have a little set of cards that has the definitions of all the literary terms, and you've got them clothespin to your wall on one of those ribbons between two hooks. And students can just go and walk along the line and see onomatopoeia, metaphor, all the different terms, right? And if they see one that they're working with right then, they can unclip it from the string, take it to their desk, and just have the definition there for a second while they're working, and then they can return it again later. Let's consider one more example of like a physical resource you can have to help solve a problem. Something that many students struggle with, and I think you may nod your head along, is how to analyze quotations that they've plopped into a paper, right? They made a point and they put their evidence down, and then boom, they are ready to move on. If that's something that happens to your students all the time, you could build a little shelf in your classroom of models of students who have analyzed quotations really well in their writing. And you could highlight the quotation, and then you could highlight the analysis. And you could have a little stack of 10, pages out of papers that have really great quotation analysis. And when you're working with a student who's like, but I already put a quotation, then you can be like, oh yeah, good job. But like, you really have to take it that step further, like we talked about yesterday and last month and in September, remember? And they're like, no, I don't remember. And you're like, okay, well, go check out some of the models on the shelf. Check out how your friend Joey did it in his last paper, and check out how the captain of your baseball team, Mark, did it last year when he was in my class. And, take a look through some of other people's analysis. And right there, you're giving them a whole bunch of models that are constantly available. And then if they forget during the next paper, they know they can go back and look at those models and use their peers and their students who have come before them as mentors. Another thing I just want to quickly mention, because I was thinking about the Ed Deck this week, is that resource decks and posters can also be for you, right? Maybe you really want to remind yourself to do an attendance question every day, so you print a little poster with 100 attendance question ideas and tape it up by your desk. I certainly did that, and I found it very helpful to just have it right there by my computer anytime I was starting a class and I couldn't think of something. I built the Ed Deck because so many times, like going into 11 o'clock at night, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do in fourth period tomorrow? I just can't think of anything. And with the Ed Deck, if you haven't seen it, I'm putting a picture in the blog post, but it's like a resource deck for lesson planning that just has like 50 different ideas for a lesson for tomorrow. That's a kind of scaffold that you can have for yourself as a teacher. If you have tons of ideas on Pinterest or whatever, put a shortcut on your computer. That's a resource deck for you. Or maybe you have a little notebook where you jot down the things you're excited to try, and you always keep that on your desk. Or maybe you use the Ed Deck, like whatever. You're also allowed to have resources in the classroom to back you up and make your work easier, just like students. Okay, next real quick, let's talk about media elements. These tend to be more expensive, and they may not be something on your immediate horizon, but maybe at some point you'll have some budget or a grant, or a student's family will want to be donating something. Now, you don't need these things to do multimedia projects. You can do, audio projects with Vocaroo, which is totally free online. You can do video projects in Canva. But if you do have the budget, sure, it's fun to pick up a Blue Yeti podcasting mic. That will feel professional to students. Yeah, it would be fun to have a green screen for different types of video projects. Yeah, it could be fun to have noise canceling headphones so that students working solo over a little counter space in your room can really focus and tune out the groups collaborating in other parts of the classroom. Media elements can be a great addition if you happen to have the budget. And if you don't let that stop you from doing media projects. All right. Next, let's talk about idea holders. This is a really fun one for me, and one that I think maybe we could think about more. This comes up a lot when you look at sort of how really modern collaborative workspaces are evolving beyond the school environment, and also at places like the Stanford D School, which I have been really looking to a lot lately as a model for creative spaces. Idea holders can be a lot of different things. Post-its are an amazing idea holder. If you have some blank wall or a blank table or a poster board or a foam board or butcher paper, whatever, and you can cover it in Post-its, that's a really cool way to make a whole bunch of ideas visual and look for connections. A big whiteboard space or a table painted as a whiteboard, that can be a really cool idea holder. Chalkboards of all sizes and shapes, bulletin boards, maybe a big glass window that you have with expo markers. Idea holders can really be a good partner for students who are trying to come up with ideas, showcase those ideas to each other, prototype on their ideas and then improve them, collect evidence for some big theme, etc. So if you have the opportunity to invest in different types of idea holders or to create different types in your room space, like by doing chalkboard paint on a table or on a section of wall, or getting some rolling whiteboards or whatever, having more spaces where students can showcase their thinking is a cool way to empower student creativity. Okay, we're on the final wave here. Last but not least, let's talk about signs. This isn't one of our categories of classroom resources, but rather kind of a container for all of these resources. When you put all this wonderful stuff out in your classroom, whether you're organizing a theater corner, whether that's exciting to you right now, or creating a little shelf of maker materials, or adding a little row of headphones on hooks or whatever, consider how you can add signs that make the space feel more accessible to students, more like they have ownership over it. So let's say, for example, you're going to do the thing where you highlight some student analysis in their papers and you're going to make a shelf. Students aren't even going to know that that shelf of papers is anything they can touch unless there's a sign, right? Even if you announce it in class, like 90% of kids are not going to take that in a permanent way. But if you have a sign that says models and exemplars, feel free to borrow and return, then boom, like you get their attention, right? And that becomes a little area that they can manage and they can use. Or so you have a basket of markers. That's awesome. But you want students to take them and you want them to return them. So maybe next to the basket of markers, you put a sign that says, please use, and then please return neatly, right? You're making it clear you want them to use the markers. You're also making it clear you want to see them come back. Maybe you've created a lovely little sort of pull-out counter space in your classroom, but students aren't really sitting over there. You could put a sign up that says quiet work zone, headphones requested for multimedia, or something like that, right? When you start to sign the different spaces in your room, you can really give over some ownership and agency to students so they start to feel like, okay, I'm allowed to read over here. I'm allowed to sit over here and put on headphones when I want like real focus time. I'm allowed to pick up these mentors. I'm allowed to unclip things from this line. I'm allowed to borrow this literary terms dictionary, whatever it is. And also, I'm expected to put it back. I'm expected to keep this area neat. I'm expected to recharge the microphone or whatever, right? Your signs can really help you with that. Okay, my friend, we've reached the end of this episode in the series. And in fact, we've reached the end of this series on classroom space design. It's been a really exciting journey for me diving so deeply into this over the last 4 or 5 weeks. I hope it's been interesting for you too. I want to remind you not to forget to grab your copy of the Ed Design Toolkit. This is a huge free resource I put together for you. It's full of super quick wins, small shifts you can make in your classroom, tons of links for late night shopping if you just want to find the perfect whatever. I've got a lot of ideas for you. So please follow the link in the show notes to grab that totally free toolkit. And I hope it's going to be a big asset to you as you work on small projects along the way to make your creative space the one that you dream about. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.